The Ducks finally make some much needed changes at the top. We'll talk about that and more on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. I've been covering hockey for well over a decade, and this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Just go to fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. So I'm currently the PA announcer for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, and I've also covered the San Diego Gulls for Defend the Nest. Been covering hockey for over a decade, and we've got some pretty big news to talk about. And I was going to mention this on the previous podcast, but I figured this deserved its own podcast because there's some other news that was buried into the latest, I guess, press release from the Anaheim Ducks. And this is a big one. I mean, don't discount this move. This is a very, very big, very important move for the Anaheim Ducks moving forward. So I'm just going to read this off verbatim. So the headline was that the Ducks announced hockey operations updates. And, you know, they talked about Rick Patterson, who has spent 2 decades with the Anaheim Ducks. So I'm just going to read this verbatim. The Anaheim Ducks have promoted Rick Patterson to general manager of the San Diego Gulls, Anaheim's primary development affiliate in the American Hockey League. This move is very important. Patterson has been working with the Ducks for a very long time, and someone that a lot of folks are kind of happy to retain for Anaheim. And this is just me personally talking. This is a good move for the San Diego Gulls. They're going in a new direction as well. And for him to get this job, I mean, this is a big, big deal for the San Diego Gulls, who are trying to not really change direction, but they're trying to move forward with their prospects, with their development. Obviously, the last couple of seasons have not gone well for the San Diego Gulls. They have missed the playoffs in both of the previous seasons. So now looking for something different, something new. And I'm glad for that. I really am. Now, there's a little bit more to this. The reason for this move is because there was some other, I guess, auxiliary news to go with this. The reason that he is now the general manager is because someone else had to leave that post. And this is because Rob DeMeo has left the club due to personal reasons. Yeah, the Gulls GM has left due to personal reasons. And you know what? I'm not going to just go into it. We wish Rob the best. Whatever personal reasons those might be, just leave it as is. And we'll wish him luck in his future endeavors. So Rob DeMeo is now out, and Patterson is now in that main GM role for San Diego. So that's why that move was made. There was a secondary move made in that regard, and this has to do with a little bit more. This has to do with... All right, I'm just going to read this as is. Mike Stapleton is now the assistant general manager of the Anaheim Ducks. All right. That's pretty cool. Stapleton is entering his 10th season with the Anaheim Ducks. He was recently the director of player personnel for the Anaheim Ducks the last couple of seasons and tried to aid the hockey ops department in trying to get players via free agency, trade, and especially, most importantly, the NHL draft. Now, he did spend the previous 7 years as a professional scout for the Anaheim Ducks and was instrumental in picking up some key players in the past NHL drafts. So Stapleton now becoming the assistant GM of the Anaheim Ducks. I consider that nothing but a good move, and I'm okay with this move very much. This last part got buried into this story, but I think this next sentence is probably the most important part of this press release. The contracts for assistant coaches Newell Brown and Craig Johnson will not be renewed. I'm going to pause for a few seconds while all the Ducks fans watching this are going to celebrate. So I'll give you fans a few seconds. Yep. All right. You done celebrating? All right. So to the delight and joy of the majority of the Ducks fan base, Johnson and Brown are out as the assistant coaches for the Anaheim Ducks. Look, I'm just going to call a spade here. The Ducks special teams, I'm going to start with the special teams and then keep going from there. The special teams in the past 3 years that they've been assistant coaches have not been good at all. Just to look at the stats for the last 3 seasons, from 22 to 24, the Ducks in that 3-year span have ranked dead last in penalty killing with an awful 74.6%. That is not going to do it. That is the worst amongst all 32 teams in the National Hockey League. As far as power play, not much better. The Ducks ranked 27th in power play percentage with an astonishingly low 18.5%. The only teams lower, the Seattle Kraken, 18.4%, the Blackhawks, 17.4%, the Blue Jackets, 17.4%, the Canadiens, 15.8%, and the Philadelphia Flyers way down there at 13.4%. The Flyers have been really bad on the power play. There's a reason that they've missed the playoffs in that span. But the Ducks are right there. I mean, those teams that I just listed, the Kraken, they made the playoffs one season. The Blackhawks, they've missed. The Blue Jackets, they've missed. The Canadiens, this after their Stanley Cup run, they've missed the playoffs. The Flyers, not much better there. So looking at what the Ducks gain by subtraction, yes, I'm gonna put it that way. This does 2 things. One, it brings in new voices for these special teams, especially the power play. 2, this takes out the last remnants of the Dallas Eakins era. Now, these were both assistant coaches that Dallas Eakins vouched for and brought on to the Anaheim Ducks while he was still coach in Anaheim. Craig Johnson has had kind of a weird few years in SoCal as far as coaching. This goes back to the Ontario Reign back in 2019, 2020, where John Wroblewski, he left the Ontario Reign in the middle of the season, also for personal reasons. And the Ontario Reign went through 2 head coaches that season. It was Chris Height and Craig Johnson. So they were both head coaches, sort of. So Craig Johnson, he tried his best with that Ontario club, and that team struggled. That team struggled in 2020 and 2021 with Johnson at the helm. So it was the following year that he went to Anaheim, also in kind of a weird move too, because the Ontario or the LA Kings franchise, I think they were still hoping to find a place for Craig Johnson somewhere on their staff. And there was a whole lot of just coaching carousel going on with the Los Angeles franchise, which wound up with Todd McClellan being the head coach. So Johnson was kind of just elbowed out from Los Angeles and swoops into Anaheim. Kind of the same way that Mike Stothers wound up from Ontario to Anaheim. Now Stutz, for lack of better terms, he's a SoCal guy. Mike Stothers loves his time in SoCal. He's been in SoCal since 2015 as coach of the Ontario Reign, and that was for 5 years, and he hasn't left SoCal. Immediately after Ontario got rid of Stutz, he found a spot with the Anaheim Ducks, and Coach Stutz, he had to step down because of his cancer diagnosis. So he's kind of had to take a step back. He is still involved with the Ducks organization as an advisor. He is still around Honda Center once in a while. He is still around at Pechanga Arena, kind of keeping an eye on the San Diego Gulls as well. So at least Stutz is still around. But losing Brown and Johnson, yeah, the Gulls need a change, but the Ducks need a change much more. This is nothing but good news for this franchise. And think about all the young guys that are going to step in to this team next season, all the firepower they have. Getting some new voices is nothing but good. And this will do something else. This will help out Ducks head coach Greg Cronin. Now he can bring in his staff. He can bring in a couple of voices that he wants on the bench with him. So I know last season, some Ducks fans were saying, oh, let's get rid of Greg Cronin. Like, even though he's coaching, not much has changed. Well, now that the assistant coaches are gone, now we can finally see what Greg Cronin is all about. Now he's got a chance to show what he can do to change the fortunes of this franchise. All right, we're going to head into the first intermission, talk a little bit more about this major change on the other side. And now a brief word from Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. Saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. You could talk to a team of award-winning agents who walks you through the process step by step. And you know what? Policygenius gives you the unbiased advice you're looking for from a licensed expert support team. They have no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez talking about this big news that took place. I consider this big news because of what the Ducks have gone through the last few seasons, considering how historically bad the Ducks have been the last 2 to 3 years. Yeah, they've been historically bad, folks. The last 3 seasons, the Ducks have finished not good as far as points. The only 2 teams worse than the Ducks as far as standings points, the San Jose Sharks and the Chicago Blackhawks. The Ducks had 193 points, Sharks 184, Chicago 179. The Ducks third worst in that span with a record of 81, 134, and 31. This also includes just how bad the Ducks were. Not this past season, but the previous season. Yes, I didn't forget this. The Ducks have the record for most shots allowed in a season. That record is going to stand for a long time. As far as goals, yeah, the Ducks were almost dead last in that 3-year span, only averaging 2.59 goals per game. The Sharks second worst, 2.54. The Blackhawks worst, 2.41. Goals allowed, Ducks were right there towards the bottom. The only teams worse, the Canadiens and the Sharks and the Blue Jackets. Not many teams worse than that. The Ducks are just bottom 5 in pretty much every important category in the last 3 seasons. And I want to talk about Greg Cronin for a hot second. Now, I am going to be a Greg Cronin defender here because I don't think he was given the full capabilities, or I guess he wasn't really able to implement his systems entirely. There are still remnants from the Dallas Eakins era. I still believe that Dallas Eakins stuck around 1 year too long. I truly believe that. Now we can finally get away from that era. We can finally get away from those remnants. Not that I want to wish any ill will on anybody. I don't. And it's never good when someone loses their job, but you have to kind of face the facts and you have to see how the Ducks have performed in the last 3 seasons. I've read the comments. I've seen the comments on Twitter, on YouTube. I read the comments, or rather, I will try to read all the comments Wednesday morning once I get to Acrisure Arena. I will try to read all of them. Look, it's been tough. It's been tough going for the Anaheim Ducks these past few seasons, and I get it. I get the concern. I get the frustration. A lot of the comments wanted Newell Brown out. In fact, that was one of my questions on the mailbag that I answered last week. One of those questions asked about Newell Brown. And I even said last week, he might not come back. Yeah, I didn't think that he was going to come back. And was I a little bit critical about that? Yeah, slightly. But now Greg Cronin can bring in some candidates. And if I were Greg Cronin, I would look at some candidates in the American Hockey League, because there are plenty of excellent coaches in the AHL that I think could get a very good shot at an assistant coaching job in the National Hockey League. Look, you never want to recycle assistant coaches from the NHL. Sometimes you want to give those young guys a shot that have proven themselves in the American Hockey League. And a lot of them have. So I'm not going to toss out any names right away, because this is still, brand new information. I am going to be at Coachella Valley on Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning. So I'm sure I'll ask some folks around, like, who are some coaches that you like? Because I'd like their opinion on it too. I mean, there's plenty of coaches to go around. Look at Edmonton. They've had Woodcroft go from head coach in the AHL to coach in the NHL. Even Chris Knobloch, who's currently the coach for the Oilers. Even though, again, the Oilers were down in the series, you know what? It's never a bad thing to give some of these younger coaches a chance, give them something to prove. And you want to look at the teams that have really good special teams in the American Hockey League. And I'm not meaning to turn this into an AHL discussion, but bear with me for just the next couple of minutes. You need to look at special teams. It's very important to look at a lot of coaches in that regard. And I would look at Charlotte. Charlotte has very good special teams. I would look that direction. I would look at Hartford and Hershey. Look at those two teams that are playing each other right now in the Calder Cup playoffs. They both have some of the best special teams in the entire American Hockey League. In fact, I'd be shocked if all three of those coaches from Hershey are still in Hershey going into next season. They're all excellent coaches. And I'll even go further. The Ontario Reign, another team with a stellar special team. And I'll throw out one more. The San Diego Gulls. They had pretty good special teams this season. They had a 20% power play. They were top 10 in the power play this past season. So I would even look internally. But as far as teams that have always had excellent special teams, look no further than the Stars franchise, especially in Dallas and also especially in Texas. That entire franchise has had amazing special teams the past 4 or 5 years. So maybe look to pluck some guys from those teams that I've mentioned. All right, we're going to head into the second intermission, and we'll just wrap this one up with a neat little bow on the other side. And now a quick word from FanDuel, that is, right? It is the playoffs in the NBA and the NHL, and it's winner take all time. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $5, guys. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, futures, and much more. By the way, did you know that FanDuel also has AHL playoffs? Yeah, there's a big one happening in the AHL in SoCal, Coachella Valley versus Ontario. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez, and we're just going to wrap up talking about the Edmonton Oilers. Now, why am I talking about the Oilers for the end of this podcast? 2 words: Corey Perry. So for those of you that may have missed it, I'm recording this late Tuesday, early Wednesday. So the Oilers and the Canucks are embroiled in the battle of Western Canada to see who can move on to the Western Conference Final. And there was a moment in the third period that did make me chuckle a little bit. Let me explain. Middle of the third period, Edmonton's winning 2-0, and a scrum ensues in front of the bench. And there are several players in there, several players just kind of drawing it out, getting ready to do whatever they're going to do. And then right there, you see Evander Kane right there. You see, I think, Desharnais right there. And then you see Corey Perry. And to try to describe this is kind of weird. So he holds his stick in front of his face as if he's going to cross-check Brock Besser. But instead of moving his stick forward, he just kind of holds his stick a few inches from Brock Besser's chin and just gives this serious look as if to say, no. Like, I don't know how else to describe what we saw there, but, you know, is he trolling? Is he having a little bit of fun right there? I don't know what he's doing. All I know is it's Corey Perry being a menace. This is something that Ducks fans or hockey fans in general have been accustomed to for the past 18 seasons, is we've seen Corey Perry pull crap like this. And this was just one of those pièce de résistance type of plays that just makes you laugh. And he's just holding the stick there and not moving at all. And Brock Besser is not going to try to get past Corey Perry. He's not going to try to get in his way. He knows who Corey Perry is. And Pear's just kind of being a troll, doing what he does best. And just trying to get under the skin of his opponents. That's what I will call it. Trying to get under their skin. It may have worked. Edmonton did tie the series up at 2 games apiece. So just to recap, that series tied at 2 games apiece between Edmonton and Vancouver. And also the Boston-Florida series still not over. Boston won that game, so Florida's up 3-2. So still no series have finished. And I talked about that briefly on the last podcast. So I just wanted to give that little update and just have a little fun there talking about Corey Perry, because, you know, it's always fun talking about just not the lighter side, but kind of the funner side of hockey. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's just Corey Perry being Corey Perry. So you got to love that. All right, we're just going to wrap up here on this podcast, but I want to thank you all for listening. Thanks for watching. Later on this week, we will have at least one episode from Acrisure Arena, as I will be out there the rest of the week as the Coachella Valley Firebirds take on the Ontario Reign. This is the Ice 10 battle. Whoever wins this series will move on to the Western Conference Finals to take on the winner of the Milwaukee Admirals versus Grand Rapids Griffins series. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Also check out Locked on Kraken, because I'm tentatively planning on going on that podcast at some point. So do check that out as well. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Don't forget this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, ad-free on Amazon. We're also on YouTube. You could follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. You could email me at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. And once again, thank you all for your continued support. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for making this your first listen. It is so greatly appreciated. And also check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 channel on YouTube. We're also on Amazon Fire TV, so look for us there as well. For Locked On Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great rest of the day. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.